Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing yet another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment as per usual. We've got a couple extinct animals, we've got a bird, mostly mammals today as well, but we've got a wide variety of mammals, so that'll be quite interesting. But we're going to be starting off with the bird first. So this is actually one that I've worked with a little bit in my career, and because lives in New Zealand and I'm a New Zealander. So we've got here the New Zealand Scaup done by Ginger Toast. And its modern name is Papango, or Papango, that's how you say that. So there's a really cool bird here. So New Zealand Scaup, Athia novazelandii, and also known as the black teal, or Papango in Māori. These guys are a diving duck that are endemic or only found in New Zealand. So they were first formally described by Johann Frederick Gulm in 1789, where they were called Anas novazelandiae, which basically was meant the New Zealand duck. But then James Cook, on his second voyage to New Zealand, managed to find a watercolour painting of this one and take a picture. And the picture of the holotype is actually now held in London. And then it was moved into the species Arthreira in 1822 by German zoologist Friedrich Bolle, and this is believed to be in reference to a sea-dwelling duck species. And it's a monotypic species, so there's no subspecies or anything associated to it, but yeah, still quite cool. So the New Zealand Scaup is a small, round-bodied diving duck with a dark plumage, as you can kind of see there, but both sexes can be quite easily distinguished. So they have black legs and webbed feet for swimming, and they spend a lot of time in the water, where they can travel actually quite considerable distances. They measure about 40 centimeters long, or about 16 inches in length, and weigh about 695 grams, or 24 ounces in females, or about 610 grams for females, so 22 ounces. So you can see the male has kind of like a dark black-brown plumage with a striking yellow eye, and I believe this is definitely a male. So the females, you can see, are probably a little bit more drab in that colour, so that's the female here, so you can see a little bit more brown, duller chocolate brown coloration with brown eyes, and a white face that has a white patch during the breeding season, and also a white wing bar can be seen on both sexes, and both sexes have grey bills. And young, initially, as you can see, are covered in a grey-white down, and juveniles look like the females, except no white on the base of the bill. And males have a high whistle kind of call, while the females do that typical duck quack, the typical quack. So they're typical quackers. In terms of their habitat and distribution, they are found throughout both the North and the South Island of New Zealand, in deep freshwater lakes and ponds, and recently even oxidized ponds and hydroelectric lakes. And despite being widespread, they are quite patchy, and most scaups live on suitable habitat in the Northland, Upper Waikato, Rotorua, Taupo, Hawke's Bay, West Coast, North Canterbury, and the Southern Alps. And like other members of their genus, they're actually not migratory, although they do move from open water to high country lakes if they become frozen. And actually has been a recent population expansion in Christchurch thanks to predator control and suitable habitat. So in terms of their behaviour and ecology, they're usually seen in flocks during autumn and winter, and the flocks of over 200 birds have been seen in traditional molting sites in wintering places such as Lake Rotorua, Lake Taupo, Lake Turina, and the Vomi sewage and ponds and Ashburton lakes. So New Zealand Scaup typically leave their wintering flocks by September, and the males become territorial, where they make a bowl of grass with other similar plants lined with down and in dense cover close to water, so that's where they typically make them. So we'll have a look at the babies while we talk about their reproduction. I think that's an albino there. Anyway, so sometimes scaups actually brood in loose colonies if suitable breeding habitat is scarce. Typically they like to do it by themselves. But egg laying is mostly from October to December, with some late or replacement chicks being laid until February. The clutch can contain 2 to 15 creamy white coloured eggs, and the typical range is 6 to 8 eggs, with clutches of 12 or more being laid by multiple female scaups. The eggs are about 65mm by 45mm, or 2.56 and 1.7 inches in size, and weigh 71 grams. And the eggs are typically laid in intervals between 1.2 to 1.4 days, and incubated by the female in about 30 days. The female will then brood the ducklings on the nest up until 24 hours before leading the ducks to water. the little ducklings, and they're immediately capable of diving and feeding once they're born, pretty much. And the females guard the brood during the fledging period, which is about 75 days. And occasionally, rafts can be formed by several females and their ducklings. They can have up to about 50 birds. An average to maximum lifespan age at first breeding and survival rates is not known, because few of them are actually being banded because they're considered quite common. Yeah, they're actually quite cool. They are considered a diving duck because they can dive up to 3 meters underwater, so that's quite cool. So a diving duck, and they typically look for aquatic plants, small fish, water snails, mussels, and insects. So I've seen with the Australian coot, though it is thought the Scaup takes advantage of the food stirred up by the coots and then frost it for the shrimps. And they can dive for at least 3 meters, but potentially quite a bit deeper. And most dives last for about 15 to 20 seconds, but some can last even over a minute, so that's quite cool. So in terms of their conservation, during the late 1800s and early 1900s, the Scaup population did decline quite a bit due to habitat destruction, introduced predators like rats and cats and stoats, but also duck hunting, with adults and ducklings being vulnerable to predation and during nesting and chick rearing, which resulted in low breeding success. And they started recovering when they when they were partly protected in 1921 and then fully protected in 1934. With predator control and new breeding and feeding habitats have allowed the Scaups to increase in population, especially in Christchurch where they've managed to recolonise. And the last time the population of Scaup was actually assessed in the 1990s, the population was estimated to be about 20,000, and it's likely it's increased since then, so these guys are now considered the least concerned. So nice to see the papango, a really, really cool species. Love working with them. There's a couple at work that like to, hang out, and it's really, really cute. We love them. But yeah, these are the Scaup. So we're moving on to an extinct species. This was done by Ginger Toast. Next up, we've got Great Cakes Mods, who's done a really interesting species. So this is Proteloyaa, I believe we'll say that, Lysoni, done by Great Cakes. So what's really interesting about this kind of species is these guys have a bit of a sordid history. The origin of the group that this is the type genus for has been kind of really found around the place. It was really thought to be a primate, and then it was originally considered to be hyenodont, then a relative of the modern shrews, but recently has been placed within Aphrotheria, which is a group that includes things like elephants, hyraxes, manatees, and then also like aardvarks and otter shrews and tenrecs, and a group of really interesting like African animals that kind of develop to do a little bit of everything. So that's what they're kind of being placed in now, as they have similar anatomical features in the skull that are actually quite in common with aardvarks. So they're currently placed as sister to aardvarks, though they may be related to other types of Aphrotheres, which is really interesting. And there has been actually a reconstruction of the diet, and their toothwear suggests that they kind of crushed hard and abrasive food and had little no sharing ability, so they may be like pretty much giant kind of shrews or like giant tenrecs, so they may have been really good at crushing things, which is quite interesting. But the genus itself is Proteloyaa, which is a genus of Aphrotherian mammal from Oligocene, so about 30 million years ago or so. I think a bit more than that actually, from East Africa. The type species P. lysoni was described by Henry Fairfield Osborne from the Jebel Quadratic Formation in 1908 in Egypt. And the genus name alludes to the Ptolemaic dynasty of ancient Greece. It actually rolled over Egypt at the time and the region where it was discovered. And there was another species kind of described in 1987 that were found in Kenya. But yeah, this is a really not well-known group. There's a few different species, but it is really interesting what these guys are, and it's nice to see some really interesting weird animals, considering what it could be related to. We'll have a look at where it fits on here. So, oldest fossils that I don't mention that. Egypt during existence of tropical swampy environment. Recently, Proteloyaa has been placed with Aphrotheria in the base of paleobiology, as the taxon was endemic to Africa, and because of some similarities in the common with aardvarks. Can I mention that? Yeah, had abrasive food. The golden moles, otter shrews, and tenrecs are part of the same clade, the Afro-Infectus area. So that's kind of what it would likely be related to. Things like aardvarks, tenrecs, otter shrews, golden moles, all those kind of things. But yeah, really, really cool one. Not one with a lot of information, just because it's not known for much. But it's cool to see this species, represented in the game. And Great Cake Spot, even with the littlest amount of information, really creates a really awesome model for it, and I think it is amazing. I'm really a big fan. Must be some kind of aardvark or something, hopefully. But yeah, we're going to carry on. Next up, we've got another extinct species. This one's done by Monsoon. We've got the Toolache Wallaby. So we got a wallaby, and sadly an extinct one. They're also known as the grey wallaby. So these guys are an extinct species of wallaby known from southeastern Australia. So these guys were first described by George Waterhouse in 1846, where the type specimen was collected from South Australia. And they were thought to be their own genus, like Halomatris, and then, assigned to a subgenus of Macropus. But now they are considered their own genus called Notomacropus grayi, so that's kind of their name. And its closest living relative, due genetic evidence suggests it was the western bush kangaroo, or western bush wallaby. And the common name has also included monkey face or one-two, and the Toolache may have actually come from the Najari word or Aboriginal word, which is interesting as well. So these guys were quite cool. They're, quite a slim, graceful, elegant creature that had a pale, ashy brown pelt and a buff yellow underbelly. And the tail was pale grey and almost became white near the tip. Its distinctive black mark on its face reached to its nose and eyes. You can kind of see that there. And its forearm, feet, and tip of the ears were all black. The different colours of the animal also consisted of different textured fur, which was believed to have changed seasonally or varied between the individual. And the body measurements actually differed in males and females. So generally male Toolache wallabies were about a head to body length of 810 millimeters, while females measured up to 840, so quite a bit bigger. And despite females being taller, males had longer tails, while males had a tail length of 730 millimeters, females had 710. So which is quite interesting there. In terms of their behaviour, not too different from other wallabies. They were nocturnal animals, foraging in vegetation during the twilight hours of the day, and their movements were actually quite unusual and extremely rapid, able to outpace any terrestrial predator, and they were even able to evade the fastest dogs by colonial hunters. So that's quite interesting there. We'll have a look at a little baby while we talk about the habitat. So these guys typically lived around the southeastern corner of Australia to the western part of Victoria, and their preferred habitat ranged from swampy, short grassland areas to taller, grassed areas on the upper country. They're also known to be quite sociable, living in groups, and often seen resting and grazing in groups. So some of the threats they faced, which is quite sad, and that caused sadly their extinction, as we'll get into. The combination of numerous threats actually caused the decline and the eventual extinction of the species. One of the largest factors was habitat destruction, and since the swamps were quite an important part of their habitat, once they were cleared, there was less habitat for these guys to live in. And then you had, besides destruction, there was also the introduction of predators such as the red fox, which began to kill off the species, and then it was also hunted for sports and for its pelt. And it actually, the Toolache wallaby, because of that, only survived after about 85 years after European occupation. In the 1920s, a conservation effort was actually made to try and bring the animal back from extinction. And the plan was to capture and breed the last known surviving members of the species in captivity. And sadly, this ended in a disaster. So only 10 of the 14 of them were accidentally killed on their attempt to capture them. And then the remaining 4 did survive in captivity. But the last wild sighting was recorded in 1924. So just over 100 years ago, and the last known Toolache wallaby survived in captivity until 1939, and the species was then presumed extinct by then, although extensive research still being conducted in the region, and there have been potential sightings up into the 1970s. However, there's been no mention or no surviving members since. So they'd be one of those great candidates, they're colossal bioscience and all that, talking about bringing back direwolves and mammoths and thylacines. This would actually be a pretty good one. It's got close relatives, and would be fast breeding, so you could see results pretty quick. So I think this would be a good candidate for de-extinction, personally, since it's only went extinct less than 100 years ago, rather than thousands of years ago. But yeah, really, really cool animal. Sad it's extinct, but another great example of, a great monsoon mod. Really, really awesome. So next up, we've got another cool species here. This one's done by Bongo Hardwood. We've got the returning bongo. So we've got the yellow-backed duiker. So let's have a look at the yellow-backed duiker. So another really cool one here, Bongo really knocking it out of the park. So the yellow-backed duiker, these guys are Citrophilus zovicauta. They're a shy forest-dwelling antelope in the group Artiodactyla. So in terms of their taxonomy, the scientific name has mentioned that before, and they are a type of, kind of duiker in the family Bovidae. And they were first described by English botanist Adam Alfurge in 1815. And the generic name comes from settler, which means head, and lophus crest, so basically it's named in head's crest. And the specific name, silva custo, means comes two Latin words with silver wood, and then cultus is cultivation, which is interesting. So it's kind of that refers to its habitat. And yeah, there are 4 subspecies recognized, but I'm not sure how actually true they stand to this day. In terms of their description, yellow-backed duikers have like a convex body shape, standing taller at the rump than at the back, and they have very short horns, about 8.5 to 21 centimeters, or about 3 to 8 inches, with a cylindrical and ribbed at the base. The orange crest of hair, as you can kind of see there where they get their name, can be found between the horns, and yellow-backed duikers get their name from the characteristic yellow patch of yellow hairs on their rump, and actually stands when they feel threatened or alarmed. And the female duikers actually often grow to be slightly larger than males, which is a little bit interesting as well. In coloration between these sexes, and there's very little sexual dimorphism present. So that's the male there. So let's have a look at the female. I think she still has horns. So yeah, there's not a lot of sexual dimorphism, as the male and the female is pretty much the same. Their head to body length is about 115 to 145 centimeters, or 45 to 57 inches, with a short tail measuring about 11 to 18 centimeters. And they get to about 60 to 80 kilograms, which actually makes them one of the largest in the genus of the duikers. And they have a large mouth, throat, and jaw musculature, so they've got big mouths that eat things. So we'll have a look at the baby soon. We'll have a look at you there, though. There's the male. In terms of his ecology, the yellow-backed duiker, these guys are mainly forest animals and live in semi-deciduous forests, rainforests, montane and riparian forests. However, they can be found in open bush, isolated forest embankments, or in clearance of savanna as well. Their convex body shape is great for forest living, as they're able to push through kind of bush and things like that quite quickly, which is pretty cool. And duikers are also very flighty and can be easily stressed. And when frightened or pursued, they'd almost blindly run from a threat. So they've actually, in captivity, they've been known to just run headlong into glass and startled, and have actually had injuries because of that. And yellow-backed duikers are active all time of the day and night. They live mainly in solitary or in couples, rarely even in small herds, and these elusive habits is really hard to tell, learn about their ecology and the demographics compared to other ungulates. And they are thought to breed, as we talk of the baby, throughout the year. Though mainly breeding 2 times each year. They give birth to one or kind of 2 offspring, 1 or 2 offspring after gestation of 4 to 7 months. And the calf remains hidden during the first week of life and is weaned 3 to 5 months after birth. Sexual maturity then is reached about 12 to 18 months. And in males, and about 9 to 12 months in females. And the lifespan in the wild is about 10 to 12 years. Or they can live up to 22 years in captivity. So in their diet, the forest-dwelling antelopes typically feed selectively on plants, or even parts of plants like just shoots, roots, leaves, buds. But their diet is mainly made up of fruits. The yellow-backed duiker is actually more effective at digesting poor-quality food than most other duiker species, so they're able to eat large, low-quality fruits. And their diet makes them very hard to keep in captivity because most domesticated fruits are not suitable for their low fiber requirement. So they also are considered concentrate selectors. They may eat diet relatively low in fiber, and have a well-developed ability to forage selectively, a rumen bypass, a rapid passage, and a high fermenting rate for starch, as they frequently encounter toxins. And actually one of the few antelopes in the world that can eat meat. Occasionally they will kill and eat small animals, which is quite interesting for this guy. You'd think, they'd be big and bad and dangerous. They wouldn't think they would be eating birds and things like that, but they do. A lot of animals do, not realizing. So they're actually considered quite primitive within the Earlian Bovidae history, and as mentioned, they are quite large. They're closely related to the Gentex duiker and Abbott's duiker, which are considered the larger duiker groups. And they seem to belong to a group that are quite convergent with a lot of other animals, or both in morphology and ecology and behaviorally. Similar things like artiodactyls, rodents, and lagomorphs. So they're kind of like a little thing that runs around fast and can eat long energy. They're kind of cut in a small niche, which is quite interesting. And they are considered near threatened because of this, because of they are the most heavily hunted species across the forests of West and Central Africa. Because they are not only a vital food source for people living there, but a source of income as well. Their flighty, easy to scare nature makes them freeze up on torchlight, which makes them easy to hunt. and when animals are stunned by torchlight, they can almost walk right up to them. And this puts yellowback duikers at relatively major risk of overhunting. Some scientists even predict that they're maybe a quite serious risk. So the IUCN puts this status at near threatened because they are incredibly fragmented distribution because of habitat destruction and things like that. But also hunting is kind of a big worry because it's easy to hunt them and they're quite prized. And they may actually already be locally extinct in some areas. And the loss of species may have many impacts because not only do they are a main food source for indigenous people, they also are a seed dispersing agent, so they're able to eat seeds of plants and disperse them around the rainforests. So losing them would be a hit to the ecosystem, but also to the local people as it makes money on them. And they also are prey for a lot of different carnivores like leopards and things like that. So they're quite important, to keep alive in the ecosystem. But yeah, still another really, really cool species. Definitely a big fan. So again, done by Bongo Hardwood. Next up, we've got another mod by Great Cakes. This time we're going to have a look at the monkey. We have got the blue monkey, or the diameter monkey. So let's have a look at this one. This particular subspecies is called the Stallman's blue monkey, and they're sometimes considered different full species or things like that. It's kind of, it depends on who you ask. But these guys are a species of monkey, of oldwood monkey, native to Central and East Africa, ranging from the Congo River Basin up into Angola and things like that. So in terms of its, despite its name, it is actually not noticeably blue, so they have little hair on its face, but they do sometimes give it a blue appearance like a mandrill. Well, they don't have the vivid blue of a mandrill. They're mainly olive or grey, apart from the face. The blackish cap, feet and forelegs of the mountain can be brown, orange or grey, depending on the subspecies. A typical body length, is that a baby? Oh yes, we want to have a look at the adults. That's what we want to look at. A typical baby typical size ranges is about 50 to 65 centimeters in length, not including the tail, which is about as long as the animal again. And with females weighing a little over 4 kgs and males up to about 80 kgs. So in terms of the ecologies, they live in evergreen forests and montane bamboo forests, and live largely in the forest canopy, coming to the ground infrequently. They're very dependent on humid, shady areas with plenty of water. And it eats mainly fruits and leaves, but will take slower moving invertebrates. It prefers to live in quite tall trees, which provide both shelter and food, and thus, like almost all gunans, suffer from loss, habitat loss, like habitat destruction. When pine plantations replace natural forests, they may actually be treated as a threat by foresters, as they sometimes strip back exotic trees in search of food and moisture. And they're also hunted as payback for crop raiding and also for bushmeat. So in terms of their diet, they eat fruits, figs, insects, leaves, twigs and flowers, but are primarily frugivores, with 50% of the diet being fruit, with leaves or insects being their main source of protein, while the rest of the diet is made up by seeds, flowers and fungi, and they really do eat vertebrates. They eat a variety of plants, but concentrate on a few species, which means their population is generally dependent on a plant's species richness and diversity. So as well, what's quite cool as well, they actually join a lot with red-tailed monkeys for extra protection, and they actually will groom the other species as well. Their social systems, though, are mainly female because the male leaves once they mature. The males have little to no interaction with the young, and these guys are quite territorial. So the young males must leave quickly to help themselves become more successful. They challenge the dominant male of another family. If they defeat that male, they'll take over the leadership of the family. And this offers a place to live, socialise, and food supplies for the young male. They can also be nomadic. So in terms of their social structure, they are female bonded societies, so only about 5 to 15% of the monkey's activity budget is occupied by social interactions. And the most common social interactions are things like playing and grooming. And relationships with group members vary, so infants interact most frequently with their peers and adult or juvenile females, but they rarely see adult males. And alloparenting is actually quite common, so the most common infant handlers are juvenile females. That usually one infant is carried by a number of alloparents, so this allows the infant to learn how to socialise at an early stage of life. So they pretty much, a couple others help mum deal with babies. And interesting female-female relationships do exist within the blue monkeys. This relationship is believed to be shaped by their feeding ecology, which is in turn shaped by between group and within group competition. So blue monkeys exhibit strong, aggressive competition between groups and between other species because of their territorial character, but milder towards more frequent competition within groups. So the earlier beliefs that blue monkeys were not territorial, more current expanded research show that they are territorial and it's overall infrequent. Moreover, overall agonism rates within blue monkeys are very low, and within groups, conflicts are mild and infrequent between females, because these females distance themselves from one another and feed at different sites to avoid competition. And although blue monkeys were believed to be egalitarian, current extended research confirms that the linear dominance occurs in female blue monkeys, which becomes more apparent when food sources are scarce. So we'll have a look at the babies and then talk about a mating system. As you see, they're quite cute little babies here. So in terms of reproduction, they are polygamous, and with a corresponding sexual dimorphism in size, as the males are substantially larger than the females. As I mentioned before, about twice the size. Females normally give birth every 2 years during the onset of the warm raining season. Gestation will be about 5 months, and the infants are born with fur and their eyes wide open. The group sizes range from 10 to 40, containing only a single adult male, and is often found in groups with other species of monkeys such as red-tailed monkeys and various red colobus monkeys. They tend to also mate with more than one female, but the females only mate with one male, and the female attracts mates to copulate and use their body language, and they will breed throughout the year. And these groups can have about 40 members, as I mentioned before, and the females usually help care for all the young, not just their own. So they do help each other out. So, it takes a village to raise a child, and these guys take that to a literal extent. Yeah, really, really cool. Another cool species that we get to see, and another great cake spot. Definitely knocking it out of the park. Okay, so next up we've got another one here. We've got by Wallaby, really cool Wallaby mod. We have got the European Wildcat. So let's have a look at the cute little guy here. How can you not love these guys? Absolutely adorable. So these guys are the European Wildcat, or Felis sylvestris. These guys are a small wildcat species found in continental Europe, Great Britain, Turkey, and the Caucasus. So in terms of taxonomy, they were described in 1778 by Johann von Schoenberg as he described the wild cat, and there were a few different subspecies proposed, and then there was 2 subspecies of 2017 kind of recognized as Sylvestris and Caucasia, so one from Turkey and the Caucasus, the other from Europe, Scotland, and Sicily. But in terms of phylogeny, they are closely related. They actually have a common ancestor, is believed to come from about 1.62 to 0.59 million years ago, with the common ancestor there. According to mitochondrial DNA, the genetic divergence is about 4 million years ago, and both models agree the jungle cat was kind of the first feline species that diverged, and then the African and European wildcats were kind of the last ones, and they are believed to be the closest relative to the domestic cat. So in terms of characteristics for this species, the European wildcat furs varies from colour from brownish to grey with paler contour hairs. They have 5 stripes on their forehead, which are broken up to small spots, and the dark stripe behind the shoulders expand to a spinal stripe running to the base of the tail, and they have other kind of plotches there. And the top of the head and the forehead bears 4 well-developed dark bands that kind of, go down there, so you can see these kind of stripes there, very similar. Some individuals have few light spots in their throat, so there's a bit of variation there. The dark narrow bands start at the shoulders and run to the base of the tail, and they do have guard hairs that measure about 7 centimeters long. The tip hairs, which are about 5.5 to 6 centimeters, and the undercoat is 11 to 14 centimeters, which is quite interesting. So in terms of their size, large males in Spain reach about 65 centimeters or 26 inches in length, with a 34 centimeter tail and weigh about 7.5 kilograms. And they have a less diffuse stripe pattern and larger teeth, since they feed more on rabbits than the wildcats in the north, which are more dependent on small rodents. And they're on average bigger and stockier than your typical domestic cat, have longer fur and have non-tapering bushy tails. Males on average weigh about 5 kilograms or 11 pounds, or up to about 8 kilograms, about 18 pounds. And females on average about 8 pounds or 3.5 kilograms, and their weight typically fluctuates about 6 pounds or 2.5 kilos, potentially up there. They also have proportionally shorter cheek tooth rows with smaller teeth and a broader muzzle than African wildcats, And since European wildcats and domestic wildcats opportunistically interbreed, it's actually difficult to distinguish wildcat and striped hunters correctly based on the basis of only the morphology. Typically, the only really way to tell is through genetics. So in terms of their habitats, these guys live primarily in broadleaf forests and mixed forests, and they tend to avoid cultivated areas in their settlements. And the northernmost population lives in northern eastern Scotland and has been extirpated from England and Wales. There are two disconnected populations in France, one in the Andorras and one that extends to Luxembourg, Germany, and Belgium. That lives in southern France and may connect to the Pyrenees, Spain, and Portugal. And in the Netherlands, they were recorded in 1999 and in 2004, and there, but it was dispersed from Germany, so they may be going back there, and they're also present in the Jura Mountains, so quite a wide range there. They are considered least concern, but there, as I mentioned, there's a little bit of a disjointed population. In terms of their kind of ecology, they are active foremost at night, though in disturbed areas they can also be active during the day. In Sicily, there was an individual that was photographed in 2009 and then again 2018 at the same location. It was probably at least 10 years between that, time capture, so they do live a long time. In terms of their diet in Western Europe, they all feed on things like hamsters, brown rats, dormice, water voles, voles, and wood mice. From time to time, they will also eat small carnivores like martens, polecats, stoats, and weasels, as well as fawns as red deer, roe deer, and chamois. And in the Carpathians, they feed primarily on the yellow-necked mouse, the northern red-backed vole, the Tara pine vole, and occasionally European hares. In Transcarpathia, they feed on mostly mouse-like rodents, galliforms, and squirrels. And in some areas they prey on water voles, birds, and some even like brown rats, water voles, and muskrats. Birds often taken by these guys include warblers, Virginus ducks, coots, spotted crakes, and gadwalls, though in most areas they tend to be primarily feeding on rodents, but they also eat on fish, crayfish, birds, a lot of things like that, so pretty much that kind of variety. And the Scottish wildcat, which is the one in Scotland, preys typically on European rabbits, field voles, bank voles, and wood mice, but also a lot of birds as well. In terms of threats, they are becoming rare, have become rare, although they're legally protected. Some people do shoot them as they mis-ID them as feral cats. In the Scottish Highlands, there's approximately 400 were thought to remain in 2004, with interbreeding with feral cats being a significant threat to the population. The population in Portugal and Spain is also threatened by interbreeding with feral cats and loss of habitat. So there is a lot of threats there, though they are considered least concern. There is a lot of threats to certain populations. But have a look at these little kittens while we get a chance, because look at how cute they are. Have a look at a little kitty cat. And that does help when we talk about their conservation efforts. So even though they are considered least concern, there is a lot of conservation efforts helping them. They are protected. In Germany, there's the 2004, the Friends of the Earth Germany created the safety net for European wildcat, where they've been relinking Germany's forests and planting trees and bushes that are suitable for the wildcat and which are larger than 500 kilometers squared. So pretty much connecting areas of bush so they can move around freely. And they actually have developed, they're aiming to double, in areas inhabited by wildcats by linking populations within Germany and neighbouring countries until 2019. In Scotland, you hear a lot about the Scottish wildcat. There's a lot of conservation work going into them. In 2013, the Scottish Wildcat Conservation Action Group actually kind of created a plan. So what they did was kind of get funding, and now they've started, breeding them in captivity as well. So they've been breeding them in captivity and releasing them into the wild. With some areas in 2023 they will get the license, so there's been 90 cats released in June 2023, and a further 40 follow in 2024 and 2025. And even last year, some of these cats would have had given birth to kittens in the wild, so they're doing okay. In England, they're starting to do, again, conservation breeding, so captive breeding, to release into potentially wild to reintroduce them. Scotland, they are protected, even though they have declined. They're trying to bring potential habitats and things that are monitored to try and help them. Also France, their population has declined, and they're trying, small population, trying to help them, trying to reconnect habitats and things like that. So yeah, most of the conservation stuff pretty similar. But yeah, really, really cool. Definitely a big fan of that wildcat. Wallaby always doing a good job. So next up, last but certainly not least, we have got a really cool animal here. We've got by Leaf, got the African manatee. So all the adults hanging out here. I'll move you over here so we can get a good look at you. Or we'll just let you speed up. Okay, so here we are. So this is our manatee in the water, as I keep going on about. So This is the African manatee, or Trichelus, singaliensis. So these guys are also known as the West African manatee. So these guys are a species of manatee found, and you guessed it, West Africa, from Senegal to Angola, and the only manatee species actually found in the Old World. The other species, like the Amazonian and the West Indian manatee, both live in the New World. So these guys were officially described as the new species in 1795 by Johann Helmut Friedrich Link, and no subspecies known as a taxon. Even though African manatees live in both coastal and in isolated inland areas, genetic evidence suggests no significant differences between the populations. And they fall under the genus Toolache, which has the Amazonian manatee and the West Indian manatee. So in terms of their habitat, they include the widest ranges of habitats of any Sirenian species, which is quite cool. So they range from offshore islands in the Atlantic to the western Sahel to rainforest rivers and so on. And it's actually reported that coastal populations ascend rivers during the rainy season and descend during the dry season. And the popular movement and habitat of these manatees have been threatened by agricultural and hydroelectric dams, so that's a big issue as well. So there's some dams that have actually isolated different populations of these manatees. So African manatees can be found in West Africa, in Angola, Cameroon, Chad, Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Guinea, Gabon, the Gambias. So Ghana, all those West African and Western African countries. And the habitats they're typically found in are brackish waters and to fresh water, so they can be found in oceans, rivers, lakes, estuaries, lagoons, and bays on the coast. And they really inhabit water temperatures below 18 degrees Celsius or 64 degrees Fahrenheit. So manatees can be found as far as 75 kilometers or 47 miles offshore, where there are shallow coastal flats and calm mangrove creeks filled with seagrass, and also inland lakes they'll live in due to fluctuating, water levels and flow rates. Some of these permanent lakes serve as refuges for manatees when in the river, and some of these permanent lakes serve as refuges for manatees when connecting rivers during the dry season. So all these different rivers, and kind of as the change with the warm and the dry and the wet season, they kind of refuges, and then they can go out and go in the rivers when it starts raining again. The area with the highest manatee populations are Guinea-Bissau, and the lagoons there, that's got quite a high population there, and the majority of manatees favour living in those areas. They were radio tagged, and kind of they feed in coastal lagoons and mangroves. They also be found in grassy estuaries with big rivers and things like that, with particular coastal spots where they kind of find a lot of food and things like that, which is quite cool. So this is the only one here, so we'll just let them go. So manatees, omnivores, but mostly herbivores, so they have been known to occasionally eat clams, mollusks, and fish. But the percentage of their diet that is composed of non-plant matter varies based on location, with manatees living off the coast have a lifetime average of 50% non-plant material, and they're the only Sirenian that seems to intentionally consume non-plant matter. So other manatees are considered strict herbivores, and the majority of the diet is a variety of flora that can be found above or hanging in the water. They also inhabit rivers, mostly eat kind of the overhanging plants as well, and the diet of manatees living in estuaries always consists of mangrove trees, and also seagrasses and other microorganisms, things like that. Each day the manatee eats about 4 to 9% of its body weight in wet vegetation and microorganisms in their intestine, kind of, which can measure up to 20 meters long. Allows them to digest it, very much, to help digest it all. So we'll actually get some of the girls in here so we can, get them in the water, because we want that. So it's not just them. I think they all want to go for food though. Who knows, they might not. See if they'll stick around a little bit. Anyway, so the African manatee is not too dissimilar from other species of manatee. The widest part of their body is the middle, and the tail resembles a paddle. They're grey in colour with small colourless hairs that cover the body. However, algae and other small organisms do actually grow on the back of these manatees, as you can kind of see there, that makes them look like green or brown in colour. And calves are typically darker in colour when they're very young, and adult manatees can get to about 4.5 meters long and weigh about 360 kilograms, about 15 feet long, and about 790 pounds. They're typically extremely slow, And they mostly move between 4.8 kilometers to 8 kilometers per hour. Although scared, they can travel up to 32 kilometers or 20 miles per hour when scared. They have quite large forelimbs, as you kind of see there, that allows them to paddle and bring food to the mouth. And vegetation also chewed by the manatee's strong molars, which is its only teeth. And when a manatee is born, each jaw has 2 residual incisors, which is lost in maturity. And if manatee's molars happen to fall out, new molars go in their place. The manatee's flippers also have nails, which they use to graze other manatees. The African manatee doesn't have any hind limbs. And from the exterior, they do look very similar to the American manatee. However, African manatees are different from the Amazonian manatees, which have white markings on their belly. But yeah, visually, they're not too distinct from typical American manatees. So the West African manatee is actually a descendant from manatees that found in coastal South America during the Pliocene. Although they tend to stay in fresh water, the theory suggests that transoceanic currents, the species actually reached West Africa during the late Pliocene, and the West African manatee's appearance is thought to be a result of the currents and species movements. The African manatee's ancestors passed down advantageous migration and food traits, and they're not restricted to a certain area, and they do not heavily rely on one ecosystem for support. And the evolution of the African manatees, diversity may have been the key to survival, as they are more diverse than other manatees due to their ability to survive in salt water, though they do need access fresh water to drink. So they're just being more variable, understanding, when to migrate in the dry season and the wet season and all that. That really does help them, figure out, how to survive, and helps them, especially in, when they're trying to figure out, how to survive in Africa. So, according to the peoples of Africa, which is also, this is quite a little funny thing, Madame Water, or it's also spelled Maiwata, is a recurring character in coastal legends, is a goddess of the sea that's symbol of wealth and beauty, and she flips over canoes and enters her opposite to visit her kingdom, or entices them to come into kingdom. And it's actually believed this kind of would have been based on manatees. And according to researcher Damamba Ishtos-Mashaya, who performed research on these guys, when female African manatees surface from the air, for air, they resemble goddesses, and kind of what they think, the origin of mermaids come from. So that's kind of the African version of that. In terms of their behaviour, they are nocturnal, though they tend to travel silently, eat, and be active towards the end of the day and during night time. During the daytime, though, they doze in shallow 1 to 2 metre deep water. And in countries like Sierra Leone, they actually migrate upstream when flooding occurs in June and July. And this flooding can lower the availability of food for the manatees, as well as lower the salinity of the water. African manatees also live in groups between 1 and 6, and they have very few natural predators, but 2 of them that are considered predators are sharks, and I don't know why they're not going into the water. That's a little bit annoying, but we'll see if we can get them to go in the water again. Anyway, they have very few natural predators. One of them is crocodiles and the other one is sharks. It's kind of one of their big predators. And they are very social, spending the majority of their day kind of touching and hanging out with each other and bonding by touch, verbal communication and smell. And this creates quite deep bonds between them. And when it's time to migrate due to weather change, they will travel in larger groups to find, water. And I'm sorry that they're not quite in the water as they'd like, but that's all good, they'll go back in the water eventually. We'll actually have a look at the babies then in terms of their reproduction. So these cute little babies here, they seem to be stuck in the water. This might just be one of them things. Technical difficulties, everyone. So here's a look at that little cutie here. So this is a baby one. So the sex of an individual manatee can actually only be determined by close examination of the manatee's underside. The only visual distinction is the genital openings. However, males tend to be smaller than females. Some female African manatees are sexual maturity is young at 3, and they give birth to every 3 to 5 years with an estimated 30-year lifespan. Males take longer to mature, about 9 to 10 years, and can really fertilize an egg at the age of 2 to 3. So they typically breed year-round, but when they mate, they're not monogamous, with multiple males usually trying to mate with one female. And when the opportunity to mate with a female is at stake, males will fight each other by pushing and shoving. And female African manatees give birth to one calf at a time after about a 13-month pregnancy. And calves can swim on their own right after birth, and even though the African manatee's social organisation is not well understood, research shows that the most common and tightly knit bonds are between mother and calf. So in terms of their conservation, they are a vulnerable species because of their meat, oil, bones and skin, which can bring great wealth to poachers, and specifically used to make walking sticks or toy spinning tops in Cameroon, and they're also sold for zoos, aquariums, online as pets, and shipped internationally. And there are also countries noting manatee meat being sold on street places as well, but lack of enforcement actually means they get punished for it. Another big threat is agricultural development for these guys. Well, have a look at the baby swimming because that's really cute. Other threats include habitat destruction by increased damming or use of hydraulic powers that block their path. That means there's genetic isolation and stuff like that. Also, manatees getting caught and killed in turbines and intake valves. Boats are another big issue as they come and hurt manatees. They get caught in nets. So a lot of those things, pollution, things like that, a lot of things really impact the species. And some behaviours of actually African manatees approach people to hunt them. When they get tangled in nets, they can damage them, which means people in countries still believe that killing the manatees reduces the species size, lowers the chances of survival. Fishing nets require extensive repairs. So basically it means less manatees, less times they have to repair the net. And many of the African manatees that venture up the Niger River starve to death. And at a certain time of the year, the Niger River dries up due to hot temperatures and lack of rain, and that's why they kind of migrate. And while they don't have many true predators apart from humans, they can be threatened by sharks and crocodiles, but this is rare due to the difference in habitat. And in West Africa, the majority of manatee predation is crocodiles, so that's kind of their next threat. And I presume that'd be typically younger manatees. So let them sit up there, have a good time. In terms of conservation, though, there is luckily some efforts to help them. From November 2004 until December 2007, the West African Manatee Conservation Project completed Phase 1. During this phase, they got 6 countries to create a database of previously unknown information about the species, with other African countries have also been contributing to that to try and collect knowledge on the species and try and help them. As I mentioned, there's so many threats that they do want to help them. But during the large-scale success of Phase 1, a Phase 2 was actually enacted by Wetlands International, and they tried to collect these more information and try and get some areas, figure out the areas they live, and then research and try and adjust legislation to help protect the species. And now it's considered Appendix 1, so it's illegal to kind of export or import them. It's strictly regulated. And laws exist to protect these manatees in every country they live, but they're not well enforced. And due to the mass lack of enforcement and mental education about these species, that has caused their decline. So they are, I believe, considered endangered. They're considered, vulnerable. So not quite endangered, but heading that way. Which is a little bit sad because they are quite an awesome species. But hopefully a lot of conservation effort works for them, so they don't end up, like the Toolache Wallaby and cook up extinct, which we don't want. But yeah, that was a really cool episode for today. So we've got quite a cool assortment, a lot of modders today. Thank you, Ginger Toast, Great Cakes, Monsoon, Bongo, and Lorby, and Leaf. You've all done wonderful jobs with your mods. Really, really awesome. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to get the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.